So welcome to Legal Services for Business. This is a 90-minute session designed for small business owners, and will primarily focus on business structure and contracts, including liability and personal asset protection. Those are two of the more common areas where businesses seek legal services, but we'll also dip into other issues that are important to businesses, and where legal service is often necessary. So things like commercial leases, employment matters, business transfer, intellectual property might come up. We expect to engage all of you, small business owners, hopefully, but this is also for service providers to learn more about how they can support businesses. And the goal of this workshop really is just practical and preventative. My colleague Jen Dobransky from SBDC worked with me to put this together, and I really appreciate the collaboration we had on this. And so a lot of the questions and even our guests here today are thanks to Jen and our collaboration. So basically, what we want to do is help business owners understand when legal help is truly necessary. Definitely how to avoid waiting until issues become expensive, and how to feel more comfortable identifying and engaging the right attorney. So as I mentioned, I'm going to facilitate a panel discussion that'll be about 45 minutes, at which point after that, we'll open it up for a Q&A. So this is where we start the Q&A with our panelists here. So if you wouldn't mind, just to start out with, we'll do some intros. So starting with Erin and then going down to Elliot. If you could just introduce yourself, talk about where you work and sort of the areas of law you touch. And then Erin, if you could talk a little bit more about your clinic, that would be great.
Okay, great. Thank you guys for being here. My name is Erin Christenberry. I am the director of a brand new clinic at the University of Maine Law School. The clinic is called the Business and Law Clinic. That "and" is in there because we work with MBA students as well. So JDs and MBAs work together on actual client matters to give legal advice, business consulting advice, really anything under the sun that business students can do. And the law students will answer your legal questions. It's totally free. It's a pro bono service run by the students. The folks who we're looking for that clinic, our clients, are people who can't quite yet afford their own lawyer. So if you're not ready or able to pay a retainer or legal fees, we can help get you off the ground in prep. The clinic, like I said, is part of the law school, so we're based in Portland, but we take clients all over the state. So if you or your friends or anyone you know who is in Fort Kent needs a lawyer, we can help them too. All you have to do is go to our website and apply, and I can give you a business card, or if you just Google Maine Business and Law Clinic, we're very easy to find. And there's an application there to get in our inbox. The types of work that we do are general business. This is the first semester of the clinic, so that pool might get narrowed a little bit as we go and as we do a little bit more work. But right now, it's everything that a small business or entrepreneur needs help with to get their business running. The things that we don't do are easier to identify. We do not do patent, we do not do tax, and we don't do any kind of dispute resolution. Otherwise, if it's business related, we can probably help answer your question or send you to someone. Yeah. I think that's all the questions I was supposed to answer, so I'll pass it on.
Yeah, I'm Andy Sully. My practice is in Waldoboro, and first, this is my wife Holly, who is my paralegal and also the office manager, and really runs the place. I just sort of walk the ride. But anyway, we specialize solely in intellectual property law, except patents, and business law of all types, and litigation, and contracts. And that's basically what we stick with. And we've been open for
since 2011.
2011. I've been at this for quite a while longer, as I probably look at, but that's pretty much it.
How about your background with the USP?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I was an examining attorney with the United States Trademark Office for a number of years before coming up to Maine. And I was a law clerk with a firm called Finnegan Henderson, which is a global intellectual property firm, but I was in the DC office, which is where I sort of picked up this practice. And I really enjoy it. And my mom grew up in Smithfield, Maine, and so I'm an outdoors nut. So we used to come up every summer, and after seeing a couple of drive-by drug shootings in Washington DC, I was like, well, probably time to go. So I moved to Maine and just got a little office in the time temperature building. And I thought, oh, that's all I have to do. I've got my business card, I've got a telephone, got a desk. So just waiting for the business to pour in. Well, it turned out that in Maine at that point, some 30 years ago, nobody had heard of intellectual property law. So everybody thought I was a real estate lawyer. So, so for the most part, it was like crickets chirping for a while. And so finally, those things changed. And I was actually a prosecuting attorney for Lincoln County and Somerset County until people started deciding that IP work was valuable for business, which it's hugely valuable for your business. And that's so then I started my own firm, and that's where we ended up. And I kidnapped Holly, who was a professional artist. And I said, no, you gotta become a paralegal. And so that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you very much.
I'm Elliot Boyle. I work for Lebec Law. We have an office in Damariscotta and one in Bath. The one in Damariscotta is right across from First National. The one in Bath is right above Cafe Creme. So I work in the Bath office, so I am very tempted by the coffee and pastry smells there. But we are a general practice law firm started by David Lebec back in the early 2000s in Damariscotta. That's our home base over there. And we cover a broad array, and I also cover every practice area that we cover, but we do have a large business practice as part of our general practice coverage. And we do everything from business formation all the way through to dissolution. We do a lot of business litigation, unfortunately, which is one topic that we'll be talking about here later on, more so about preventative steps instead of getting to that point. But I have been working there for about 5 years now and really love Mid-Coast Maine, love working, love Portland for sure, but I love working a little bit outside of the quote unquote big city. I too am from away, originally from Indiana, and went to a big undergrad school, went to a small law school, really enjoyed going to law school in New England. So made it up here during the pandemic. I was one of the pandemic movers, I will admit. And yeah, I've enjoyed it ever since. So happy to answer any questions today.
Great. Thank you so much, Elliot. So I'm probably going to stick to the order I shared with you, so no surprises here, which has us starting out with you, Aaron. So when you start a business or at some point you re-examine things, why do business structure decisions matter? Can you tell us a little bit about deciding what business structure you should choose?
Yeah, there's a lot here. When you're picking a business structure, a couple big things come to mind. The first thing I'm thinking about is how many of you are there? Are you doing this by yourself or do you have a partner? That changes the game dramatically. Things get a lot more complicated when you bring other people into the mix. As Elliot kind of alluded to, business divorces do happen. So when you're getting into business with someone, it's kind of like entering into a prenup. You should think about what happens if things kind of go south. So how many people are you is my first question. How do you plan to make money? What is the business? What is the product? And part of that question is how much risk is involved in what you're doing. A lot of reasons people establish a business entity is to protect themselves from risk, to separate their own personal assets from their business assets. And in a lot of cases, that really makes sense. In some cases, it might be simpler, cheaper, easier for you to have a sole proprietorship and just be you in the business. So risk is a question involved there. What are your plans? What are your goals is the next thing I'm wondering. Is this a small business that's going to stay small? Are you going to do the thing that you're doing in your community and be happy with that? Or do you want to grow? Are you looking to bring on investors, people who are not your partner, who might want to get paid in equity? That's a question I have for you too. And then generally, how long do you expect to be in this business is another part of that question. How long are we going to be doing this thing? Is this a business you hope to sell in 5 years? Or do you think this is your life's mission? Is this your work for the rest of your career? So there's a lot of factors there. And so it's hard to say this is the right business for you without digging into some of those questions. But I think a lot of, like I said, a lot of the reasons people want to form a business is to protect themselves. Liability is a huge reason. And to add a little bit of legitimacy to your business, I think if you're by Erin Kusaberry and the business, that might not seem sophisticated to some of my customers. That might not seem like enough. It might feel a little untrustworthy, as opposed to saying, this is my formal business structure. All of my bank accounts are under that business name. All of your money flows to the business. And it's much more, it's much easier to trust someone if they have the structures that we all understand set up to protect the business. So that's I'm trying to condense my answers because we could talk about this for days, but.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I should have given the disclaimer that, this is an informational workshop and some of the topics we'll talk about today are really complex and we don't have time to dig in too deeply. So, you all have been instructed to be very brief on very big issues, which is a tall order. So we really appreciate your effort, just trying to distill things down in a way that's digestible in the amount of time we have. So you could really go on and on, but I really appreciate the synthesis of really complex issues, which, brings me to Andy. This is another pretty complex question that you could really dig too deeply into, but we've talked a little bit about contract issues. Contract issues are something that Jen Dobransky mentioned that comes up a lot in her work with the SBDC and the work that she does with businesses. What are some common contract issues or red flags that one might see with a small business?
Yes, thank you. And I think, and it's a lot what Erin spoke about when you're structuring a business is, you have to, understand exactly what the purpose is of the business. It's the same with a contract. When you're looking at putting together a contract for a client or for a business transaction, whatever it may be, you have to know what it is that the end result of this contract is going to be. And and I've reviewed hundreds of contracts that people have brought in, and one of the big problems that we find that can really ruin someone's business is that contracts that they sign are poorly drafted. They're ambiguous. They have, they have provisions that, make little sense or that may ultimately put your client at an unnecessary disadvantage that they don't understand. And it can be, so contract clarity, I think, is probably one of the most important aspects of drafting contracts for your client or in connection with a business transaction. And I can give you a real quick example. I had a very well-known in Maine artist client who came in with a contract for me to review, and it was with a small publishing company who wanted to publish her artwork. And I'm reading through it, and it seemed fairly standard, except deep down buried in this rather large tome of an agreement was this section that said, referred to what's called a perpetual license. And, a perpetual license, and as courts up here, and I'll explain kind of why the difference is, the perpetual license, a license itself usually is legally something that's got a beginning and an end to it. You may renew the license, but it gives you certain rights for a certain period of time to someone's intellectual property, and either it terminates or you renew it under the same or different situations. Well, this one just basically said that, you are granting us a perpetual license to all of the artwork that we're going to publish. And federal courts, which is where copyright law is handled, which is what this was ultimately, have construed the term perpetual license, which was deep down in small print, to mean an assignment. And the difference between an assignment and a license is that an assignment means that you are parting with whatever it is forever and a day and all of the rights. So you're basically giving up everything. So had she signed this agreement and agreed to this perpetual license, in effect, they could claim, no, what you're really doing is you've assigned over all of the rights to your artwork, and which would have basically ruined your business. So I think, in wrapping up this part, but I think the biggest red flag is when a contract seems onerous for what's really needed to be done. It's a lot of small print. It's got a lot of things that just don't seem to make logical sense. in relationship to the other provisions of the contract. So I think when I look at something, initially with any agreement, or one that I'm drafting too, is to make sure that it's very clear and that it's in a physical presentation such that anyone reading it should basically be able to understand what it is the contract's designed to do, and that they understand what each provision is, and they understand what each provision is as it relates to the other provisions of the contract. Because provisions typically don't stand alone in a contract, so they should have some logical nexus with each other.
That's great. Thank you so much. And it's such a good example, on why it's good to be proactive and to plan, to protect yourself. So yeah, thanks for giving that example. And speaking of which, Elliot, in terms of planning and protection, how can businesses conduct early legal planning, and using that as a protection tool?
Sure. So, this is a broad question, but I'll just start off with the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of, thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much. So, doing your planning up front, making sure you have a good contract in place, making sure you have the right business structure in place, making sure you have the people that you can call when things may or may not hit the fan, are good places to start with everything. It's very exciting to be a new business owner and jumping into the things that you want to do. If you're an artist, doing the artwork and meeting people who are interested in your artwork. If you're a farmer, actually doing a farmer, maybe going to a farmer's market, a restaurant owner, having that opening day, making sure you have the right chefs in your kitchen. But the important legal planning to prevent those items are, making sure you have a tax person, so that if you run into tax stuff in the future, you can give that person a call. Making sure you have a familiar relationship with a loan officer in case you need a small business loan, or if your line of credit is exhausted, so you have a good relationship with that person at the bank that can help you out in those situations. And of course, selfishly, at least having a conversational relationship with a lawyer, so you can call them up. So you're not, running around town trying to find a lawyer who may, as we are, be booking out 2 months to wait on that, immediate legal situation that you're facing, that you're saying, oh, wait, I can't wait 2 months to talk to you. I need, advice now. You have that relationship with a lawyer, and are part of the, ongoing client base. It may not even be someone, who you have on quote unquote retainer. Then, they may be willing to fit you into a 15-minute conversation that may put you at peace of mind. But I always say, again, getting those tools in place at the front end of putting your business together. It's not the sexy part of starting a business or running a business. It's not the fun part for most business owners, but putting that all together, having the right people in place for lead protection and planning is going to save you a lot of risk and headache in the future. And it will save me because I do the front end planning that I'm talking about right now, and I really enjoy that type of work. The type of work that I'm also good at, but don't necessarily enjoy, is when things go wrong or go off the rails because that planning wasn't in place in the first place. And, it can be daunting to think about all of that up front when you're starting a small business, and you may not think, what do I need this for? I'm just doing this as a small protection tool for myself as a small business owner. But I think it's really worth it. And anyone that comes in to talk to me for a consultation about their small business, whether or not it's someone just starting out or someone that's been going for a while and looking to change gears and sort of quote unquote professionalize themselves, always have that conversation about early planning and making sure you have that roster of people, and also, are you a contractor? Do you have that standard form contract that you're going to use when you go meet with a homeowner?
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that sort of risk management thought and sort of disaster planning, really, right?
No one likes to think about it, but it's no one likes to think about it for sure. But it happens. I see it, every other week.
Start with the worst. Aaron, this brings us to you, which is, later on, we'll sort of talk about when we don't need lawyers, but what are kind of situations where a business owner absolutely should have a lawyer in certain cases, or maybe have one in the queue?
Yeah. I would second Elliot's recommendation to just have a lawyer that that you trust, someone who does business work, because there are all kinds of flavors of lawyer. Not everyone understands how businesses operate. So even if you are not quite sure if you need one today, it's worth having a conversation. But the times when I would say absolutely call a lawyer, I think the easiest way to think of this is the inflection points in your business, the big moments when things can materially change. And the first one for me is when you're starting up. Like Elliot said, it's ounce of prevention worth pound of manure. The other way to say that is it's a lot cheaper to do things right the first time than to fix them when they go wrong. And I know cost is a factor, but like I said, it's cheaper to do it right the first time. So when you're starting up the business, there are all kinds of things that we can do to get your paperwork in order, to establish the rules of your business, whether that's an LLC agreement or bylaws or a partnership agreement. Setting the right tone at the beginning is going to save you so much heartache and time later. That's the first inflection point I would note. The next inflection points that could happen are when you're entering into a material agreement. If you're entering into a game-changing contract, you get your first big sale, the first thing that's really going to move the needle for your business. That's the moment to call your lawyer and say, hey, am I protected? Are we sure I'm going to get paid for this? Am I getting paid enough? What am I not thinking about that could possibly go wrong in this engagement? That, to me, that last point is the biggest value add a lawyer can have, because you guys might have things in your mind that okay, these are my hot button topics. Your lawyer is thinking of 10 different things that have gone wrong for other clients, that could go wrong for you, that we can get ahead of if we use the right words, if we think strategically, if we negotiate the right way. So getting ahead of stuff is a huge value add that your lawyers can add to you. So material agreements, formation. Other big ones are any kind of investment. If you're taking out a loan, if you're bringing on a new investor, or if you're bringing on a partner, if someone else is joining you in the business, for sure, call your lawyer. Those are big, big moments that are going to necessitate a review maybe of your whole business, certainly of your formation documents and your operating documents, but maybe even the structure of your business. Like I said, if you're giving equity to someone and you're an LLC, we're going to have to rework some things to make that actually possible, and make sure you're not giving away powers that you don't want to give away. If you still want to make the decisions and you just want someone to have an economic interest, we have to make sure that's actually what you're doing, and you're not bringing in a partner who now has the right to make every decision with you in the business. So those are some of the big ones that I'm thinking about. But every time you face something and you think, wow, this could really change my business, this could be a big moment that can affect how much money I make, how public I am, the scope of my audience, and my rights in my business, for sure, call a lawyer. Those are the big ones.
Great, thank you. That very clear that you need to have someone prepared. I guess retail leasing is probably one where you would recommend having.
Yeah, material agreement for sure. Yeah, well, it's going to last a long time too. You might be in that lease for 15 years, so you want to have someone look at it for you. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's one that I hear about quite a bit. So thank you. Andy, I'm curious if you can just share a little bit about how do you find the right attorney for your current situation? We heard about like some lawyers, like Levesque Law really runs the gamut and does everything. You're much more specialized. How do you even start?
Well, the best first approach, of course, would be to contact Zuli Law. Then go from there. But there are a lot of lawyers, and one way to do it is to call the Maine Bar Association, and they have what's called a lawyer referral service there. They also have a list of attorneys that we are really fortunate in Maine that we have a lot of extremely good lawyers in all parts of the state. So there are some good lawyers, but we have a lot of very good ones. And so that's one option. There's another program that's called the Pine Tree Legal Services. And it's a nonprofit group, but I've sent any number of clients to them because they're attorneys that are very dedicated to the practice of law, but they do not work for a big firm and they can provide very good legal services to people with limited financial resources. So part of it is finding the best place to do it, to find an attorney. One of the other ways is word of mouth. And that could be from another lawyer you may know, that may be able to refer. A big part of my practice anyway, because of my areas of law, which is, fairly finite, is referrals from other lawyers. And we have a good exchange service with a number of lawyers up here in Maine and in the Mid-Coast in particular. So sort of as a sidelight as to, what when I was president of Lincoln County Bar for a number of years, what I would tell new attorneys or law students, just say, one of the things you never want to do is to alienate yourself from the community where you're going to be practicing, because the attorney you're fighting with on one case may be a source of a referral for you. So, whether it's referrals from a friend, referrals from another lawyer that you may know, word of mouth is hugely important up here. Conversely, and it's happened at least up in Mid-Coast, there have been attorneys that have decided to set up practice in Mid-Coast Maine without understanding the makeup of the community, and a couple of them had made very derogatory remarks about people in the community in public place, which turned out to be Hannaford off the way, and happened to say it within earshot of a relative of the person that this attorney was speaking ill of, and they were basically dried up out of business. So, as part of it is, for finding a good lawyer, it's kind of helpful to know the community that you are going to need a lawyer for practicing in. There's always the looking at the website of the attorney. They will provide you with a lot of information. And what we require people to do before they, hire us and spend really any money other than a consultations, we offer an initial consultation so that they can decide, whether they even like me or, vice versa. And, it's always good, I think, to meet with them personally, and that maybe, if you've not had to have any discussion with an attorney, I think that's one way for you to find out whether you've got the right attorney, which is basically what I think we're talking about. And the attorney may be a very good lawyer, and but the attorney may have a personality that is just not, not in sync with what you need from an attorney. And it happens to all of us, as much as we'd love to be loved by everybody, that's just not the nature of our practices. But that's probably what I would suggest. The phone directory, but I think, the lawyer referral service from the main bar is always a good place to start if you just don't have any of these other connections.
And I imagine if a lawyer tells you I don't practice that kind of law, they're telling you the truth, and you should find one that does practice that kind of law.
Yeah, and there are, and I think you probably have to, there are, unfortunately, and sometimes attorneys will decide that they're going to practice everything. And it's kind of a risky business these days because it's so hard to be, that good. Even if you stylize yourself as a rather general practice firm, you're still going to have areas of law that you practice in that you're good at. Like for me, I do a lot of business law and I set up a lot of businesses, but I am numerically challenged. So I'll have clients that'll say, "Oh, well, can you do my corporate taxes for me?" And my answer to them is, well, if you want to end up in federal lockup, hire me to do that. But that's one of the other things is, does the attorney that you're working with, do they have what they refer to, do you have other resources that they can use? Like we use, CPAs, and if we have complex tax problem, it wouldn't help my nervous system to try to tackle it. So, we refer them out, and we refer cases out in areas of law that we're not good at to other attorneys. So that builds, that referral service, and it doesn't help to, know these other attorneys.
Well, that's really helpful. Thank you, Andy. And sort of building on that, time is money, and lawyers can be expensive. I know for the most part, lawyers aren't trying to charge you a lot of money. And so, ounce of prevention is pound of cure, right? We just talked about that. Do you have any practical advice for preparing for an initial meeting, which in some cases might mean a less expensive meeting because things are taken care of, or any other advice for any business that might be going into an initial meeting with a lawyer?
Sure. So as Amy touched on, usually we have initial consultations with prospective business owners or current business owners. And those, as we both probably know very well, range in their tenor very widely. Some people come in very sophisticated, knowing quite a bit, done research, have lots of business background, just starting small businesses. And then other people are looking for full education from A through Z. And all of that, I'm fine with either, end of that spectrum and everything in the middle as an attorney. But I would say probably the best thing to do is, I'll throw out another adage here, is know thyself. It's kind of like going to your doctor and saying there's a general pain, but not telling the doctor that it's in a knee, kind of, or where it came from. If you don't really know what your goals are with the business or what you're trying to do with the business, you just generally have heard that you should set up a business, but don't know too much after that. It's fine if you want to come talk to a lawyer at that point, but it might be worthwhile to do a little bit of more looking inwards to see what your goals are, what you're trying to do with this business, why you're coming to see me in the first place. That will save you a lot of money. I'm happy to walk you through all of that. And as I'm sure the clinic is, and I'm sure and I'm sure Andy is as well, but it's probably more helpful to yourself and also to me as well, to have a good set of ideas about what your plan is with this business and what your plan is going forward. You don't have to have necessarily that 5-year plan with your mission and vision outlined with, the business plan that you need to go in to get a loan from a bank office or something like that. But helpful to this question specifically, if you know your goals, then your lawyer can help you out a lot better.
Perfect. That's excellent.
And also to add on to this question from earlier, I would say word of mouth is a great point of view to find a lawyer. I would say ask people in your community as well. So if you're going to Chamber of Commerce events or going to events like this, other business owners may have lawyers that they've worked with in the past and or don't like, as to be the case. And they can guide you in that as well.
I wonder if it might be helpful in a smaller community, if maybe going outside of that community and kind of asking around.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Elliot. And Aaron, my question is about small businesses. Knowing that you haven't worked directly, your legal background has been sort of in larger businesses, but hopefully this isn't too tough of a question. Are there any common misconceptions small businesses have about legal services?
I think the biggest misconception is that we're trying to slow you down, or we're trying to tell you that what you're doing is the wrong thing. And I think for that reason, a lot of people are afraid to talk to a lawyer because they don't want to get shut down. And like we were talking about earlier, you're excited, you have a business idea, you're ready to go. You want to be told how you can go. And I think a good lawyer, a business lawyer, is still going to get you excited and still put you on the right path. They're just going to say, here are the bumps in the road that we can expect, and here's how to maneuver around them. So for me, that's far and away the biggest one, is that we're deal killers. We're trying to throw you off the path. That's not at all true. In fact, I was talking to a law firm last week, And one of the partners was saying, I constantly talk my clients out of spending money. I tell them all the things they don't need to do yet, save them some money, and then focus them on the things that really, really matter right now. And I think that is a really common mentality here in Maine. I think the business lawyers that I know are really trying to help you forward and be cost sensitive as they're doing that. So all that to say, don't be afraid to talk to a lawyer, because we're really not trying to shut you down, I promise. Yeah, and I think the other misconception is that a lawyer is like it was in the olden days when you could do every type of law, and that's just not how it goes anymore. You really have to find someone in the specialty that you need. And that might just be startup business. There are plenty of folks who just do startup law or small business law. It might be tax, it might be real estate, it might be IP, or a number of other things that are much more niche. And it is in your best interest to use a lawyer who really knows that area well, because they've done it 100 times and they know what goes wrong. They know what the market standard is. They know what's reasonable or unreasonable to ask for. So if you know what your problem is, like Elliot was saying, if you can pinpoint, this is the thing that hurts, we can find the right lawyer who will fix that thing and knows exactly how to do it. If it's much broader, like I said, there's plenty of folks who just do small business law. You can come talk to me in the clinic and I'll point you in the right direction. But yeah, if someone is telling you I do everything, think again. Ask some probing questions.
That's super great. That's helpful. And to your previous point, it reminds me a little bit about people that work with businesses that are business advisors, and oftentimes they'll slow a business down that's moving a little bit too quickly, and that can be frustrating. But in the end, it's usually much better for the life of the business.
100%. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. We're on to our last question, which is really for all of you. So we've talked about how important lawyers are, especially nowadays. But you're all expensive. I don't want to ask your hourlies, but I have an idea. Are there any times when businesses don't need a lawyer? So trying to save money on a lawyer, are there instances where a business can save money, whether it's creating a draft document and then going to the lawyer and having them look at it, or doing some work ahead of time with paperwork? Any suggestions?
Well, a couple of things is, one is that, we often have to explain to clients that, we bill our hourly rates for a reason, is that our time and our, expertise is our product. I mean, that's how we make our living, and pay our bills. So, and because it's sometimes hard to go, so like, oh, you want to charge me this much for drafting this contract. On the second thing too, as we have a lot of times people will come in and they say, well, I've already done this work, I've already done that work. And, and I explained to him, I said, well, that's well and good. I said, but my policy, which I don't stray from, is nothing comes out of here that I haven't done. I said, I'm happy to review, what you've done within the context of, will that help me better, prepare a document or advise you as to, what is the best approach for you to take. But, people do that for a lot of reasons. The one is that they sometimes think that they know more than they do, and for a lot of times more than the attorney. So, that's fairly common. But it's, to me anyway, it's a risky proposition because, I don't mind this, not ethically I have to, but, assume responsibility for what I advise someone, what I provide to them by way of a document. But, if that's going to be the case, it's just, I don't think personally it's a good practice to have people come in, and sometimes they will, they say, well, I've got a whole bunch of stuff that you can use to do this and this and this. And I'm like, well, I appreciate it. And, we'll, have Polly or something, we'll look and see if there's anything in there that will provide you with a better work product. But, you can't come, I'm just not going to, give you a product that I haven't done and authorized. So, because I understand that people want to, conserve legal resources, and on the issue of litigation, to me, that's one of the worst expenses of business money that you can make. Just my opinion. I've been it for a while. It's just, I said sometimes that's where you end up, and you have no choice, and then that's, so be it. But what I explained to them is, here's what litigation is really like. It's not going into, small claims court all the time, or what you see on TV. It's time consuming, it's exhausting, and you're always going to be asking yourself, when is my next invoice from my attorney coming, and why is this case still going on? And so, it's the cost benefit analysis, I guess, to put it way I would, it's so important for a client to understand, you can do this, but this is, what may or may not happen. You probably have a sound basis for going into court to sue this person, but my opinion of the cost benefit analysis is, are you ready for depositions? Are you ready for, court hearings and things like that? And it's complicated, but I think usually, as long as the client, they appreciate it, the fact that you're telling them this is the good, the bad, and the ugly of whatever you're doing for them. That's just me.
So ways to save money, I would say, number one, I'd go back to the know thyself a little bit adage that I just threw out a couple minutes ago. Knowing your business plan and goals are important. Not using your lawyer necessarily as a sounding board for every business idea you have. It's an inflection point. Like Aaron was saying, it's a great time to talk to us. But selling this product versus this product, unless it's a super important thing, maybe not necessary to come talk to me. The other item I would say is education. There are a lot of great educational tools out there for people to educate themselves. I'm happy to do education. I love doing education and talking to people. That's why I'm here today. But coming to events like this, coming to free other events that potential attorneys or the Chamber of Commerce put on are great tools to use just to get yourself a little bit more educated as a business owner. Sometimes some free legal advice comes out in those, and it's, great tidbit here or there that can help you out. That you don't have to come to me at my hourly rate to tell you about. And so that's what I would recommend. Education is a great place. There's a lot of great resources. Obviously, the internet is wide open. The AI tools are a good starting place, but I wouldn't recommend them as bedrock legal advice on stuff. So, yeah, and like Andy was saying, we as lawyers probably need to get a little bit better at expressing our value to clients. It's not always easy to express how, that hourly rate comes out to clients, because we're admittedly not cheap. And it's not always easy to express that, us taking an hour to review this contract that may cost you $300, that you're like, wow, that really eats at me that I had to pay him $300 just to look at this for an hour, may save you, like Andy was saying, in that contract, thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in the future. And then finally, to this point, and I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but I'll let you get to it. I would say that if you have a good lawyer, they're going to try to be saving you money. So if you give them a call, if you have someone who's saying, this is this, I'm not going to charge you for telling you this. I'm just going to tell you this, or, you don't need me for this type of thing. You can do this or talk to this kind of person. That's a lawyer you probably want to hang on to.
Yeah, I have to add on the AI point that you mentioned. Tread so lightly when it comes to AI. We in the clinic have had so many clients come to us and say, hey, AI put together this contract for me. I'm going to use this. And we say, for the love of God, please don't use this. Let me start fresh. Let me use my own form. Like Indy was saying, we care about the language that's in there. AI has a lot of great qualities, but legal drafting is not one of them. So that's just my word of warning. Be super careful. And if you're going to use a document that AI put together, please have someone with a brain look at it. It's funny because I've had a billable rate my entire career until this past year. So for the first time, I can say my rate is 0. I'm now a free lawyer. My students are free lawyers for you. And I, at the same time, want to reiterate what my co-panelists were saying about the value of someone who knows what they're doing and how much money that can save you. I know it's hard to pay a legal bill, but you are getting immense value from having an expert look at your business in any moment in time. And like we said, if you have a good partner or a good person, they're going to tell you when you don't have to spend money. And that's a critical piece of the relationship. So I don't have anything else to say other than if you really, really don't know where to start, my students would be happy to talk to you. Once we get through the wait list and the application period, we'd be happy to talk to you. But yeah, there's so much value in having a professional person help you out in spite of the fees. I know.
No, and I agree, and I'm so glad you all touched on that. Lawyers are expensive, but there's a reason that lawyers are expensive. Your knowledge and all of the costs that your firms have to incur are really top considerations. So, thank you for all of your contributions in that. I did want to get to the Q&A, but before I do that, I shared a question with you all ahead of time from the audience that couldn't make it. And it was a question about AI. So going back to AI, I was wondering if you could just quickly touch on it. And the question really is around sort of, I think like insurance considerations with AI, and really sort of what a business might need to disclose to customers when they're using AI, that kind of a thing. And then if there are any thoughts about what we have to look for ahead of time in terms of policy. And I'll just say that you mentioned running your contracts through AI, right? And I don't know if there's also like a risk you might take in that and sharing proprietary information, if you want to touch on that.
I could start with that for sure.
Yeah.
Anything you put into an AI or large language model is public. And in case we did not know that, it bears repeating it. This is all public information that someone else is using to train their own models. Putting client information or customer information in there is a huge risk to you. I cannot speak about what insurance is doing with respect to AI because insurance changes and moves very slowly. So if they're thinking about it at all, that's incredible. But I don't know if we have like formal policies, and there's certainly not a clear body of law on this topic yet. But I would caution you in any event for putting any personal, confidential client information into any AI model and putting any of your business name, your address, your name, just be very careful with that. I don't think the benefit is greater than the risk at this point. Anything that you learn from AI, you can learn just by Googling and doing your own research, I think, for the most part. So that's where I'll leave it.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say real quickly, along with the insurance aspect of it is what they call errors and omissions, which is essentially, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but akin to malpractice. And so, as we have, we all have malpractice insurance, even though we both never use it, but it's even more so with AI because, the whole issue of liability is still, fairly new, but that's one of the things if you're going to get an insurance policy for your tech business, you're going to want to look at what they call the errors and omissions aspect of that policy, and see how that would, protect your company in the event something goes wrong. One thing that is just consistent with any contract is, and I didn't mention it before, but I'll mention it now with regard to this is, you'll see certain things, waivers of certain types of liability. We're not responsible for this, you're limited in what you can collect from us for this happening. But the one thing, if you look at in any contract is if they are waiving any liability for their own negligence, which generally speaking is a matter of law, you can't waive your own negligence. And I think that's probably something, with AI, I think there's going to probably be, cases like that coming up. But that's, I guess, one thing I would be thinking of.
Great. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, I would say on this topic, E&O is probably where, if you're a direct client service provider as a small business owner, like you're providing advice of some kind or a some sort of tech product of some kind as a small business owner, this is probably where AI is going to come up the most. I would worry about it less if you're using it for your own individual purposes, except for the fact, as Aaron stated, that I would not put any personal information or important business information into these open public large language models like ChatGPT or help me out with some of the other Gemini, the Google one, the Claude. Thank you. If you are working in a very niche, small profession, there are closed loop language models that have some much higher guardrails that aren't provided. The information you provide to those are not, the large language models are not necessarily trained on them, but you have to look at the contract that you're signing when you purchase access to those closed loop large language models for your business. I would say if you're thinking of insurance, probably E&O is the way to go. I would assume that's where most of the insurance related to AI is at this point in time. But probably use the precautionary principle for this. AI is a powerful tool, very huge efficiency tool, and it's a great research tool for a lot of small business owners. But again, be cautious about what you're giving to it in terms of privacy, because once it's out there, that's what they're training the model on.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that next year, a new data privacy law is going into effect in Maine. That's pretty comprehensive, and it's bringing us closer in line with what a lot of states are doing, which is really cracking down on what companies can do with customer information they collect, the duty of care about that information, not collecting anything more than needed, and it is not in line with the duty of care that you owe your customers to put their information into an AI tool. So just keep in mind, data privacy affects all of us, regardless of whether you have a tech company or not. You have client records. This is relevant to you. Like I said, that law kicks in next year, but good to keep in mind. Something to ask your lawyer about.
Great, thank you. That's been really, really helpful. I'm gonna try to stop the recording now so that we're not recording when we do Q&A. Thank you for those responses to my questions. At that point, we're gonna open it up to the audience for questions, and I'm gonna stop the recording. So